Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. I am beyond honored to have with us today Liz Shuler, who is the president of the AFL-CIO. Liz, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jen, for having me on. This is great.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. So today, Catholics around the world mourn the passing of Pope Francis. Tell us a little bit about his work on behalf of and in favor of labor unions, which actually is not something you necessarily associate with a pope.
Yes, absolutely. We're all grieving his passage and just knowing that truly he had an affinity for the working poor, was an advocate and a voice for those who were voiceless. And we in the labor movement have a long history and tradition of partnership with the faith community, and in particularly the Catholic Church, because of Catholic social teaching being so worker-centered. So it truly is a sad day, but we will remember him and his impact, forever.
Well said. So let's take a detour back to our shores and talk a little bit about this effort by Trump and his minions to, in essence, decertify, get rid of public employee unions in the federal government on national security grounds. Now, understand for people at home who may not be as familiar with public sector employees, these people don't strike. They don't really negotiate over wages. It's terms of the conditions of their employment, their workplace, safety, and the rest. Why are they doing this?
Well, you've really done your homework. I'm impressed because you know more than the average in terms of what unions look like in the federal government. And I will say that, yes, the Trump administration, with the stroke of a pen, eliminated collective bargaining for nearly 1 million federal workers. But that doesn't necessarily mean they've lost their union, because, of course, a union means coming together collectively, having a collective voice, and the ability to, be stronger together. That still exists, but the contract itself, of course, is an issue, and we are suing on the grounds that that is an illegal action by this administration, and I believe we will win. But in the meantime, it has wrecked all the norms that we've become accustomed to as far as what it looks like to have workplace justice in the federal sector. And so, this is an unprecedented time. We're seeing an unelected billionaire basically wreak havoc across federal agencies, no matter what mission we're talking about, whether it's Department of Education or the Department of Veterans Affairs. The impact of these cuts will impact, of course, the workers themselves, but will ripple out across the economy, across our society, across our communities. And we're already starting to see the impacts. If you're talking about the notion of closing a social security office, right? We know the demographic we're speaking of in terms of people accessing their benefits, that they need the opportunity to have those local offices for service. We're talking about things like, food safety and clean water, and making sure our planes are staying safely in the skies, and that our veterans have the health care they need when they come back home. So we believe that this is going to be not just felt by the workers and those who, of course, have their union under attack, but it's going to ripple out and affect essentially everyone will feel the impact of this.
For these employees and for the missions that they serve, uh, they are mission focused. So the average person working at the Department of Homeland Security is focused on Homeland Security. But the union movement in general has been one of the strongest forces in fighting Trump on all of these different fronts. Do you suspect that that's the reason why the administration has gone after public employees, because they really don't like the fact that you're leading the charge?
That we have a collective voice and more power when we stand together? Absolutely. And in fact, when the Trump administration canceled the collective bargaining rights of federal workers. In the interpretive document, it basically said it as much. It said, you know, we will work with unions who work with us. And there are those who've shown they can't work with us, and those are the ones who are suing them, right? So, but yeah, we're one of the last institutions left standing in the country that really is a form of democracy, of workers coming together in their workplaces, and, you know, raising their collective voices when they see injustice in the workplace, when they see unsafe working conditions, when things are unfair or just not working properly, right? That's where the history of the labor movement began at the turn of the century. And it's almost as if we're coming in a full circle moment, where, you know, we have laws on the books, but when those laws are not enforced or they're enforced unfairly, the union is often that enforcement mechanism.
Right.
You think back to the days where you had an unsafe working environment, and we worked as a labor movement to pass things like the Occupational Safety and Health Act, where we could then have an administration, OSHA, that has inspectors that go out and make sure that, you know, companies aren't cutting corners and creating unsafe environments. And the union is often the eyes and ears on the ground, because people are scared. People, you know, they don't want to raise their voice and get fired. And then having a union there to be, you know, your voice and protection really does create a more safe environment.
And although you obviously work on behalf of union members, the work you do is also on behalf of non-union members and people who don't or haven't had the opportunity or can't form a union for whatever reason.
Right.
Talk a little bit about how the union in this very fraught time, we're facing an authoritarian threat that we've never had, remains, as you say, one of those few institutions that is holding the line, not crumbling like law firms, not crumbling like universities, not crumbling like big corporate media. How is it that unions are holding their ground, and what do you think the prospects are that they can help rally the country well beyond unionized members?
Absolutely. And I think that's where we've always had our roots, is fighting injustice, unfairness, discrimination, harassment in all of its forms. And so we're used to, you know, fighting on behalf of working people, no matter if you're in a union or not. There is a ripple effect across an economy and a community when you have unions negotiate a contract or collective bargaining agreement in a workplace. It inevitably lifts the standards for all working people. Even the managers, you know, in a particular workplace often benefit from a union contract. And, you know, it really is that rising tide lifts all boats kind of concept, that, you know, if you're negotiating fair pay and health benefits and retirement security, oftentimes, you know, things like fair scheduling, and a modern workplace, there's so many issues that come up that you often feel alone. But then if you have the protection of your union, you feel more comfortable in raising. So I think that, you know, a lot of people have old stereotypes, right, of what unions are and what kind of worker should belong to a union. And yes, there are unions, you know, working in settings like factories and, you know, manufacturing facilities, steel mills and coal mines, but also we have workers all across the economy and in professional settings, healthcare and education, acting and writing, as you saw in Hollywood, and, you know, even some of the new industries like technology. We've got video game workers who are actually in some of the most harrowing conditions because they're delivering on a technology that's high stakes, and they're often doing it in very tough environments that people don't even think about, you know? So the modern day workplace, really, unions are more relevant than ever.
Right. And we're seeing that they can represent Starbucks workers, they can
That's
represent
right.
Amazon workers. There has been an explosion of union activity. Let me turn to May 1st. That's the traditional day that we honor labor. What is planned in this country for May 1st?
International Workers' Day, which not many people realize, since we in the US celebrate Labor Day in September, that globally, May 1st is the day of action where unions across the globe and working people come together with partners to really uplift the struggles of working people. And so we, of course, have May Day actions happening all across the US. And most of the activity that we're seeing is outside of DC. Now we're, of course, you've seen a lot of things planned in Washington as well, but we're trying to uplift the fact that a lot of the struggles we're seeing aren't necessarily about Washington, DC and the government. The government lives outside of Washington as well. And in fact, 85% of federal workers are in communities all across this country outside of DC. So we will, we have an infrastructure in the AFL-CIO of an AFL-CIO in every state, in every town, in almost 500 cities across the country. We're doing an action this week around the cuts, bringing these cuts alive. Who are the human faces behind these actions? So we established what we call the Department of People Who Work for a Living to be a vehicle to humanize what is happening, because everyone knows someone who will be impacted by these cuts. So we said Elon Musk has his quote, Department of Government Efficiency. Well, we are gonna get out in the field and talk about what is important to working people and what these cuts mean to communities. And so we are doing hearings this week where we're capturing the experiences, not just of workers, but bringing together small business people and veterans and, farmers to say, hey, this is real. And this ripple effect isn't happening to just a federal quote, bureaucrat that they've stereotyped in Washington, D.C. It's actually real people with families and communities.
And last question for you. In the messaging and in the rhetoric that is going to be shared, in the activities that's going to be shared, will you also be addressing the issue of the disappeared? And I never thought I would say that word in the context of the United States, which is people grabbed off the streets, chucked in some maybe federal organization, federal holding pen,
Detention
states
center.
away, and then shipped off to someplace else. And then if there's a mistake made, the government says can't do anything about it. Tell us a little bit about how that is going to affect or be joined with the message of working people and labor on May Day.
Yeah, I think, thank you for raising that, because this is all related, right? This is about attacking the institutions, attacking the norms, attacking our laws, and this flood the zone strategy this administration has waged across the country and across our government and everything that we essentially take for granted. And whether that's the attack on workers that we started with in terms of federal collective bargaining, to mass deportations, to attacks on public education, it is all interconnected, and it's about dismantling, the institutions of our society that uphold our democracy, and to feed this authoritarian or, kind of march toward ultimately Trump all-out control of everything in his power. So Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the gentleman who most people know now, was a sheet metal worker apprentice. He was a union member, or still is, and his union is out there fighting, and we have joined coalitions demanding his return. This is about due process. And that's what we hold dear in the labor movement, is that, everybody deserves that right. And he, of course, was shipped to a prison in El Salvador without his due process. And so we're actually joining with other partners and allies to bring him home. And you'll be seeing increased and escalating activity, the labor movement, of course, being a real pillar of our democracy, a leader in bringing different groups together to show our frustration and our anger and channel it into action, and particularly at the community level. So we cannot allow it to stand that you can ignore directives of the Supreme Court and get away with it. So we're going to be out there. We'll be in the streets. We'll be in Congress. We'll be in the courts fighting back, and right alongside many of your listeners.
Well, it used to be said that if you have a 40-hour week or sick leave, go thank a union. It may be that if we have a democracy, go thank a union. So if people want to attend an event, where should they go? What's the way for them to get involved or to find an event near them?
Well, you can always go to aflcio.org. That's a hub on our website for everything, but particularly for the Department of People Who Work for a Living, we would encourage you to become an activist and sign up at it's DEPT of people who work.org. So Department of People Who Work.org, DEPT of people who work.org. And it's on all the social platforms. So I hope you'll follow us. And really, this is about uplifting our collective voices, no matter if you're in a union or not. We are all part of the fight back and this rapid response. And I think this is a time where we're seeing so much energy, people ready to stand up and do something and come together collectively. And that's what we do best in the labor movement.
No better message than that. Thank you so much, Liz, for what you're doing. And thank you for joining us today. We'll look forward to keeping track of all of the activities, which are many and sometimes hard to keep up, that the AFL-CIO is involved in. So thank you so much. We'll look forward to next time.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate you.